Nosocomial infections. What does it implies? It is healthcare associated infections. So infectious disease can be divided into two categories based on this definition. Those acquired within healthcare facilities. It is termed healthcare associated infection. Those acquired outside the healthcare facility or in the community, it's called community acquired infections. So here we are dealing with mainly healthcare associated infection or nosocomial infection or hospital acquired infections. Frequency of approximately 40 million hospitalization per year in United States, not in our country, and estimated 2 million patients acquire hospital acquired infections. The source of these pathogens are healthcare professionals, mainly responsible ourselves. Other healthcare workers, visitors also and patients themselves. Approximately 70% of HAIs involve drug-resistant bacteria. That's the other pathogenic scenario. So, how we define or how we differentiate from community acquired from hospital acquired infection? That is, imagine patient comes for urinary tract infection or presenting with dysuria frequency. So we term it is, we ask, is there any reason hospitalization? Perhaps in our case, we'll say no. It's a working person. Ultimately, he develops following any contacts or whatever, develop frequency dysuria and fever. So it is community acquired urinary tract infection. But imagine that patient has admitted and we are treating for urinary tract infection. But following 48 hours after admission, 2 days after admission, patient is having features respiratory tract infection. We'll say having cough, difficulty in breathing, shortness of breathing. So now that particular new patient is having, we'll say having a pneumonia. But pneumonia develop, perhaps symptom arise after 48 hours after the admission. So now that patient is having hospital acquired pneumonia. Patient initially presented with community acquired urinary tract infection. But due to our fault, mainly healthcare personnel, this infection control breach, ultimately patient has developed pneumonia. That is, in this definition, we can say it is hospital acquired pneumonia. Same manner, community acquired pneumonia, community acquired urinary tract infection. Likewise, here, that is, symptom arise 48 hours after admission. That's what we have to know. That's the working definition. But for the surgical site infection, those things, it go beyond. Evidence of poor quality research service delivery. Avoidable cost ultimately leads to increased manpower, use of antibiotics, further interventions, delayed return to work. So ultimately matters and leads to, it become a burden. Most common types of hospital acquired infections. That is, commonest one is uterine infection. Hospital acquired, mind you, HAUTI. Then hospital acquired pneumonia, surgical site infection, then antibiotic associated diarrhea, that is termed Clostridium difficile diarrhea. Then device related, like where we use foreign bodies. Central line associated bloodstream infection, ventilator associated pneumonia. Likewise, there are a lot. So who are at risk of developing this hospital acquired infection? Anybody can, but these are at higher risk. Elderly patient, that is more than 65 years old. Women in labor and delivery, that is pregnancy as well as following surgery, like delivery. It's not surgery, but awaiting and labor and delivery. It's a traumatic procedure. Premature infants and newborn, other extreme of the age. Surgical and burn patients. Then patients, I said surgical and burn patients. Skin integrity is disrupted. Surgery itself a stressful condition, as well as anatomical barriers may be interrupted depending on the surgery. Diabetic, cancer and transplant patients. Patient receiving treatment with steroids. So it is modulators, so immunosuppressive therapy, anti-cancer drugs, anti-lymphocytic serum, and radiation all leads to immunosuppression. Therapeutic immunosuppression, secondary like immunodeficiency. Immunosuppressed patient, others who have malnutrition, having chronic infections, HIV patients, patients who are paralyzed so are undergoing renal dialysis or catheterization likewise. Major factors contributing to hospital-acquired infections. We can say three major factors combinedly: an ever increasing number of drug-resistant pathogens, the failure of healthcare personnel to follow infection control guidelines, an increased number of immunocompromised patients. So one way, microbe related. This is healthcare personnel. This is patient related. So additional factors: overcrowding, indiscriminate use of antimicrobial agents, irrational use, false sense of security about antimicrobial agents, lengthy and more complicated types of surgery, increased use of less highly trained healthcare workers, that also matter, increased use of anti-inflammatory and immunosuppression agents, overuse and improper use of individual foreign devices. We'll discuss about nosocomial pneumonia. So what is the definition? As I said, patient developed pneumonia 48 hours after admission. That means patient is initially not presenting with features of respiratory tract infection. He doesn't had, but once he entered, he has acquired this condition while in hospital. That's why it termed nosocomial pneumonia. Common hospital-acquired infection, one of them, occur at a rate of approximately 5 to 10%, 5 to 10 cases per 1,000 hospital admissions. Incidence increases by 6 to 20-fold in patients having ventilation, mechanical ventilation. One study suggested that the risk for developing VAP, that is ventilator-associated pneumonia, increases 1% per each. So it is part of a nosocomial pneumonia because ventilated patients are within the hospital premises. They are not coming from the home. So we'll say nosocomial pneumonia, we can again divide in healthcare. These are all a healthcare associated to health nosocomial pneumonia. And from there, some without ventilation, patient who stays in the ward setup, having ambulatory. So patient may develop pneumonia. Some may we have intubated. So it is patient develop following 48 hours after intubation. If patient develops new onset pneumonia, that is termed ventilator associated pneumonia. That is within that particular vein, and it is part of nosocomial pneumonia. But for the clarity, because management options are different as well as therapeutic options, antimicrobial and causative organisms are different. So we classify them separately as ventilator associated pneumonia. Another study suggested high risk occur in first 5 days after intubation, that is related to VAP. Nosocomial pneumonia is the leading cause of death due to hospital-acquired infection. That is commonized nosocomial urinary tract infection, but leading cause of death, high mortality is associated with nosocomial pneumonia, associated with substantial morbidity, has an associated crude mortality of 30 to 50%. That's high fairly. Hospital stay increases by 7 to 9 days per patient, and estimated cost is more than $1 million per year in USA. Mortality and time of presentation of HAP. Here you see those no HAP, and early onset HAP and late onset hospital-acquired pneumonia. Hospital mortality is very high compared to non to early onset, significant. Here to here, significant. But here to here, it is more than 5. It is not significant. So that means early onset or late onset compared to non-hospital-acquired pneumonia is associated with high mortality. In between early to late onset, some may say, some articles, some may not, but anyway, it's having high mortality, but no differences as such in here. Microaspiration, how it develops. Microaspiration may occur in up to 45% of healthy volunteer during shift. So you have to know how pneumonia develops. So usually in day-to-day life, when we are sleeping, healthy personnel has we may develop micro aspirations. That means aspirations. Here micro means it's unnoticeable level. There are tiny particles reach into our trachea. That is term aspiration. So oropharynx of the hospitalized patient is colonized with gram-negative resistant pathogens in 35 to 70% of patients. Multiple factors are associated with high risk of colonization with pathogenic bacteria and high risk of aspiration. So imagine patient comes with for a maybe surgical site for a surgery and patient develops pneumonia 48 hours after. Imagine how it goes. Usually main route is pneumonia, aspiration of oropharyngeal and gastrointestinal organisms. Inhalation of aerosols containing bacteria, it's other route, and hematogenous spread, blood from other route also possible. Here you can appreciate. So there are host factors, ultimately antimicrobial other medications, surgery, invasive devices, oropharyngeal colonization, gastric colonization, it's lead to microaspiration. Meanwhile, there are contaminated respiratory therapy, testing and anesthesia equipment, or contaminated aerosol generation. Then it can reach into lung alveoli and provoke inflammatory response, leads to infection and inflammation of lung parenchyma, that is pneumonia. Meanwhile, bacteria can reach into circulation, bacteremia, as well as bacteremia per se can and lodge into alveoli. So that is the other route. So in our day, when we are hospitalized, our oropharyngeal flora perhaps will tend to colonize within few days, because we are touching, healthcare personnel also touching from hand to mouth, it comes, okay? Then compared to person in community, here we may tend to get more resistant, more virulent pathogens, but they remain as colonizers like MRSA, pharyngeal colonization is there, nasal colonization is there, even Staph aureus MSS. But later on with the patients are a bit of those who are at risk, like elderly, young, those who are waiting surgeries, who's having various procedures, they are at risk. So they get microaspirations compared to healthy mucociliary escalators will propel them up and go into we swallow them. But in this case, their immunity is partially disrupted anyhow. So they're more prone to develop this kind of infection compared to healthy personnel. So as I said, host factors, what I said in common manner, host factors same, and maybe lung pathology, COPD. So there are factors enhance colonization of the oropharynx and stomach by pathogenic microorganisms. And also if patient was admitted to ICU, not intubated even, administration of antibiotic which selectively kill other microbes and remain resistant pathogens, chronic lung diseases, they are more prone, and endotracheal intubation also one of a risk factor. So conditions favoring aspiration or reflux. So patient is in a supine posture, debilitated, depressed consciousness, ET intubation, insertion of NG tube and nasogastric tube, or patient in mechanical ventilations. Factors impede adequate pulmonary toilet, surgical procedure that involve head and neck. So all the head and neck area is anatomically disrupted. So having swelling, pharyngeal swelling likewise, normal anatomy is has changed. So ultimately it leads to or make vulnerable to develop infections. So what are the etiological agents? Nosocomial pneumonia, community acquired pneumonia, it is Streptococcus pneumoniae, but Haemophilus influenzae, Moraxella catarrhalis, and atypical organisms. Here it is mainly Staph aureus, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, Enterobacteriaceae, but about E. coli, Klebsiella pneumoniae, Serratia. Likewise, there are a lot of organisms. Enterobacter, likewise, and Acinetobacter, which is more common related to VAP, ventilator-associated pneumonia, but at the same time, it can develop nosocomial pneumonia. Polymicrobial origin can be anaerobic bacteria there, Legionella there in the whirlpool, and associated with aerosol generation procedures, AC and cohort towers. Then fungi like Aspergillus, even Candida, and viral also possible. How do we diagnose? Not necessarily easy to accurately diagnose hospital-acquired pneumonia, but we can implement clinically. Patient, as I said in the beginning, patient develop new onset of cough, fever may be there or may, and purulent production of purulent sputum, radiography, new or progressive infiltrate of chest X-ray, may see opacification suggestive of pneumonia. Laboratory, that is rise of CRP, rise of procalcitonin, leukocytosis or leukopenia, depends, okay? Like Legionella, it may cause neutropenia. Microbiological, suggestive gram stain and positive culture of sputum or tracheal aspirate or bronchoalveolar lavage, bronchial brushing, pleural fluid or blood. Quantitative cultures we often do. So bronchoscopically directed technique for diagnosis of VAP and quantitative cultures. If VAP, we do either we take from endotracheal aspirates or we maybe do bronchoscopically or protected specimen brush, another method. If more than 10 to the power 3 coliform units per ml, it is diagnostic. Likewise, what are the differential diagnoses? Nosocomial pneumonia, adult respiratory distress syndrome, pulmonary edema, pulmonary embolism. So we have to exclude these lung contusion, alveolar hemorrhages. Like so, antimicrobial therapy, that is empiric. Usually we give broad spectrum penicillin, third and fourth generation, cephalosporins, carbapenem, quinolones, aminoglycosides, likewise. Duration of antimicrobial targeting we can do with the culture positivity, and duration often it is 7 to 14 days. Preventive measures. Incentive spirometry, increase lung function, promote early ambulation, avoid CNS depressions to reduce microaspiration, decrease duration of immunosuppression, infection control measures, educate and train personnel. So preventive measures further, avoid prolonged nasal intubation, suction secretions as a usual manner, semi-recumbent position, change it, head and elevation. Do not change ventilator circuits routinely more often than every 48 hours. Drain and discard tube condenser. Use sterile water for respiratory humidifying devices because otherwise we are straight away introducing contaminated material air into lungs. Subglottic secretion drainage, it also advisable. So then remove nasogastric tube when no longer needed. Avoid gastric or distension. Straight ulcer prophylaxis, that is proton pump inhibitor, we also often give. Acidification of enteral feeding, prophylactic antibiotics, maybe inhalation, coexident oral rinses to prevent candida growth and other bacterial growth, vaccines if influenza and strep pneumonia. That's how we do. Hospital-acquired urinary tract infections. About 25% of the patients do develop during their hospitalization. Almost all of them are placed the same admission. A large number is placed in emergency departments, also who are in medical or surgical ICUs and intensive cares. About 15 to 25% of patients during their hospitalization will have an urinary catheter placed. That is mandatory. If they require, we offer. Media place either in intensive care or ED. But there is one problem. 40 to 50% of these patients do not have a valid indication for urinary catheter placement. That we have to be rationalized. So your urine catheters are not harmless, but they can develop urinary tract infection, mechanical trauma to urethral bladder, immobility, leads to pressure ulcers, prolonged stay, likewise. So prevalence, 600,000 patients develop hospital-acquired UTI per year. So it is mainly associated with catheter-associated infection. UTI accounts for 40% of hospital-acquired infection. What I said, it is the highest or commonest. So catheter-associated UTI, catheter risk of bacteria increases each day of use. Per day, 5%. If we do use 1 week, risk of bacteria is 25, while if you 1 month, it is almost 100%. So how? They form biofilms. It's a nice topic you read. So it's a foreign material. So organism attached to and grow on surface and produce extracellular polymers here. It's the electron microscope. The Staphylococcus biofilm on indwelling catheter. Intraluminal ascent of bacteria faster than extraluminal. Intraluminal means within the tube. Most catheters use more than 1 week have biofilms. Extraluminal more important in women because short urethra. So this is the pathogenesis. So how it goes. So this is a collector. This is from bladder, balloon. It's a margin. So it's a connector there. So from here, or there, this is the intraluminal, extraluminal. Usually associated with females, early at teen session, led by capillary action of microbes. They can move there, extraluminal, outside or the surface of the tube. While intraluminal, break or close drainage, contamination of collection urine bag or change of urine bag, position and gravity. So they can reflux. So usually males are at a risk of getting intraluminal associated, while females are associated with extraluminal extension or route of transmission is as such. So there are risk factors. You can see more than one considered as risk. Catheters urinary tract infection. So its antimicrobial drug therapy has reduced the risk, but it's not advisable. You can see female genital high risk, having malnutrition, azotemia, that is creatinine high, urine, blood urea is high, urethral stent also high risk of. Likewise, or bacteriological monitoring, not recommended for asymptomatic patients. That is, patients who doesn't have any kind of symptoms related to urine tract infection, we often not advised to do urine culture. Only culture urine if the patient has symptoms. So cloudy urine does not really say infection. Sediment in the urine also, it is not reflecting infection. So asymptomatic bacteria, it's another term. Here, no benefit from treatment. I put increased risk of resistance and increased risk of developing C. diff diarrhea. Other thing is pyuria does not equate infection when catheter present. Asymptomatic or sterile pyuria is there are multiple conditions like previous antibiotic use, non-culturable organisms may be there, even tuberculosis. We have to exclude sterile pyuria, but pyuria in the patients, pyuria in pus in urine, okay, pyuria with the catheterized patient, we don't care much. Other thing is asymptomatic bacteria is patient doesn't have any symptoms, but once we do a urine culture, we may get in more than 10 to the power coliform units per milliliter. So it is significant bacteriuria. So it is termed bacteriuria, significant. So that since patient doesn't have any sign and symptoms, so it is termed asymptomatic bacteria. Asymptomatic bacteria screening is advisable and treatment is recommended in patients, pregnant patients. Others we often not to order, but sometimes patients who will awaiting to undergo cystoscopy or any gender urine procedures, we often advise to treat. Otherwise, we often not. So other thing is about the urine sampling. Once we are going to do urine sample from catheter, we intentionally, perhaps we don't have any intention, but we may aid to, we are providing risk to develop aqua urine tract infection while this contamination. Discourage urine catheter use for specimen collection. It's another thing. If you want to collect urine, but patient is unable to produce urine, please wait, don't rush. Or as well as don't put a catheter to collect urine for culture. That's wrong. So urinary catheter insertion, it's a hygienic hand hygiene before and after placement, aseptic technique, use sterile gloves, drapes, antiseptics, those things, and periurethral cleaning and single packet of lubricant for insertion, like we are putting Lidnocaine. And Placements. Use smallest catheter size, effective for patients, depending, because if a larger gauge, patient may risk of traumatization of urethra is high. Catheter should be properly secured to prevent movement and urethral traction. If having urethral traction, patient may get microtrauma as well as macrotrauma. Potential site for contamination. What I said earlier, sampling port. Disinfect. We want to avoid disinfection. So site where sampling port. Treatment, and that once diagnosis is established, we have to go with proper empiric treatment as well as ABST, depending on we may give amikacin or gentamicin or maybe ciprofloxacin. Likewise, therapy we can guide 3 to 5 days, as well as we have to remove the catheter. If catheter is indicated, then it become a complicated matter. Anyway, we have to assess the clearance of urine culture. Likewise, they are the same as what we discussed in other day in genitourinary tract infection, same as this. Surgical site infection, it's another common condition. If patient present with purulent discharge, abscess or spreading cellulitis as surgical site from up to 1 month after surgery, it terms surgical site infection. It's a broad period, 30 days. It's the third most common hospital infection. Incidence is 0.5 to 15%. So patient may have incisional, superficial or deep organ space generalized peritonitis or abscess. Like we can say there are different type of surgical type infections are there. Superficial incision SSI, deep incisional, like organ space, depending on the surgical incision and depth of the infection. Superficial incision, you can see if it is deep soft tissues, it's deep incision, surgical site infection. And if it is deeper like peritonitis or abscess, it's organ space. So surgical site infection transmission mode, exogenous and endogenous, we can classify. If it is exogenous, from outside, from the patient, that is from healthcare worker like surgeon, nurses and other staff, medical equipments and other patients. While endogenous, from our skin flora, we acquire the condition. Other infections in patients, blood transfusion, also there, but it's rare. So surgical site infection wound classification. Usually surgical class 1, it's termed clean surgery type, and type 2 clean contaminated and dirty infection. So all the up to 1 to 3 clean contaminated, up to contaminated, we often offer prophylactic antibiotics. That is prior use, cefuroxime, fragile, metronidazole. But for the therapeutic antibiotic are ordered for dirty infections. Dirty infected, that is may have in gangrenous bowel, awaiting for surgery while we are doing surgery. So we offer therapeutic antibiotic, not prophylactic antibiotic. Prophylactic antibiotic, we don't give prolonged doses. We may give one dose, single dose, just prior to incision. Or if surgery is more than 4 hours, like we may give another dose, but we don't continue. But in therapeutic means we have to continue. So risk of infection depending on the type of surgery. Here clean, you have to know what is clean means. There is no any opening into hollow viscous, hernia repair, breast biopsy. So it's in related to skin or soft tissue where usually sterile sites. But there's a 1.5% risk of developing infection or surgical site infection following clean surgeries. While clean contaminated is we are going into infected or inflamed area, cholecystectomy, elective bowel resection. We may do bowel preparations and try to remove all the fecal material while in bioral and gastric preparations, as well as bowel lavages. We often tend to remove all the contaminated material, and also we often try to protect the peritoneal cavity while contaminating these abscess or chemical development of chemical peritonitis. That depends on the surgeon's skill. But anyway, there is a risk of getting 2 to 5% of surgical site infection. While contaminated, it is emergency bowel resection, like instances where patient comes with bowel perforations. So we can't wait. If we wait, patient will die. Patient is septic. So on that case, in that particular matter, risk of surgical site infection also high, 5 to 30%. Like while dirty and infected like perforation, abscess, here it is fairly high, 5 to 30%. Here I said perforation, but emergency bowel resection, it is maybe diverticulitis, following intersusception, like torsion we offer. But in here it is almost dirty because things are things have reached into the peritoneum. So almost the area is contaminated, fecal material and gastric, because peritoneum is sterile. Bowel is a hollow viscous, large bowel or small bowel, intestine, where which they contain microbes as well as uh, digestive material, food parts. Similarly, abscess also it contain dead and dying neutrophil, likewise high protein content area, dying microbes and uh, tissue debris. So once when they reach into ruptured abscess, their risk is high. Host risk factor same as diabetes or any metabolic disorders, hypoxemia, hypothermia likewise, and poor skin hygiene also there, and also tobacco smoking. Then perioperative, during operative site shaving, breaks in operative sterile techniques, improper antimicrobial prophylaxis, prolonged hypotension, contaminated operating rooms, likewise, and poor wound closure technique skills, they are matters. So usually operative antimicrobial prophylaxis, what I said, decrease bacterial count at surgical site, given within 60 minutes prior to starting surgery, knife to skin, incision made. Repeated dose for long surgery. Do not continue beyond 24 hours. That's advice. Determine prevailing pathogen, antibiotic resistant type of surgery. So based on that, we have to determine. Not a substitute for aseptic surgery or good technique. So dental procedures, we do cefuroxime. Ophthalmic also like gentamicin. Orthopedic, we may give cefuroxime or vancomycin, depend on. Prior to that, if we are going to do implanting, we have to screen the patient for MRSA. If patient is positive, we have to do the decontamination. For that, we offer mupirocin, that is a cream. We give all the nasal or all the nasal flares we apply for 3 times per day for 5 days. Meanwhile, we apply chlorhexidine body bath for 0.5% chlorhexidine body bath, and also their clothes, everything will be boiled off and returned back. That's should be done by the patient. So MRSA screening is done. Patient who willing to or waiting to undergo hip knee like trans hip knee like prosthetic device replacement, also coronary artery bypass grafting, and also patient waiting for undergo continuous ambulatory peritoneal dialysis. So that's the instances we are do MRI screening. Otherwise, we often not to offer. So there's a bundle of care term, prevention bundle. Prophylactic antibiotic given within 1 hour, appropriate prophylactic antibiotic selection, prophylactic antibiotic discontinue within 24 hours after surgery. And for the cardiac surgery, 48 hours for cardiac surgery. Cardiac surgery patients with control 6 a.m. post-operative serum blood glucose, because glycemic control is very much important. And surgery patients with appropriate hair removal. We are nowadays not asked to shave. Surgery patient with perioperative temperature management, maintaining normothermia. Urine catheter removal of postoperative day 1 or 2 within day of surgery being day 0. That's all. Always try to mobilize the patient. Timing of prophylaxis. Intravenous antibiotic should be given within 60 minutes before skin incision. For cesarean section, it may given pre-incision or after cord clamping. Otherwise, it may antibiotic may reach to newborn as well. We often give long enough half-life to achieve activity for duration of operation. That's how surgical site infection. Depending on the surgical site infection, we may offer patient present with high spike fever. We do blood culture as well as tissue debridement as well as if abscess, the abscess fluid for culture and ABST, deep tissue for culture and ABST. Wood soap, if we can get, we often commonly do wood soap, then gram stain, culture, then ABST and treatment. Medical as well as associated with clean and resin, incision and drainage, aspirations, or wound debridement may of depending with the surgical team management. About Clostridium difficile, as I said, it's an anaerobe living in our gut, but it can be transmitted between fecal-oral route, person to person in hospital and long-term care facility centers. We saw a human colonized or infected person, contaminated environment also possible. So thing is it's a gram-positive bacilli anaerobe, it's an spore bearer, and those spores can survive in the environment for more than 5 months. So it's as I said, obligate anaerobe, part of GI flora in 1 to 3% in healthy, while 70% in early of life in children. They form toxins like toxin A and B. Some may not produce toxins, lysogenic transformation, and they produce toxin A and B, and manifest symptoms mild, moderate, severe, or maybe life-threatening. It is termed antimicrobial or antibiotic-associated diarrhea, most common infectious cause of acute diarrheal illness. The only nosocomial organism that is anaerobic and forms spores. Pathogenesis is mainly due to toxin production. Those spores, less than 10 spores, will be enough. So this is the burden associated. Anyway, it is associated with high burden. So if once we look through colonoscopy, we can see it's a normal, its contour is there, but here it is inflamed. So some may have been colonized and no symptoms. Some have been infected and symptomatic. So what are the risk factors? Exposed to antimicrobial prior to 2-3 months. So health history is very much important. Thing is, if patient comes and nothing diarrhea there, but for the particular thing we prescribe antibiotic like clindamycin, cephalosporin. Then 2 or 3 days following, patient develops diarrhea. But there are no obvious cause for diarrhea, but then we suspect is this Clostridium difficile diarrhea. Luckily in our setup, it's very less, not very less, but in UK and other developed countries, it is high. So always when we are giving antibiotic, we have to keep in mind if he or she shall develop this kind of infection. So infection with toxigenic strain of C. difficile. Patient may have in there, and antibiotic may kill other microbes, and these anaerobes will replicate much and produce toxins and leads to diarrhea. Old age, underlying illness, immunosuppressions, likewise. So these are the common antibiotics. Always keep clindamycin top of the list, ampicillin, amoxicillin, likewise. So clinical manifestations, what I said, it's asymptomatic colonized, mild to moderate diarrhea, pseudomembranous colitis that may be fatal. It develops within 2 to 3 days. Risk of developing CDI after exposure range 5 to 10 days or up to 10 weeks. So how we diagnose? Often we do enzyme immunoassays, detect toxin A and B or both, rapid, same day, but less sensitive. Tissue culture, toxicity assay, but it's rarely done. We do glutamate dehydrogenase, but it's not available in usual laboratory setup. It is available in MRI or PCR or stool culture is the most sensitive test, but it takes time. Turnaround time is very much high. So we do culture as well as toxin detection. Then we treat using we give metronidazole. But if it is not responding, we have to give it vancomycin. Here, vancomycin we are giving oral, not intravenous. Okay, oral vancomycin tablet forms are not available in Sri Lanka, but we give anyhow. Bit about device-related infections. There are different type of catheters. You can see how it causes infection. There are risk factors, same as then catheter colonization, we have to exclude. Catheter related bloodstream infection is the one where which develop bacteremia. So clinical diagnosis is there. So what's where commonly we do differential time positive. We take blood from peripheral site as well as from the central line and check for the clinical. Is the treatment methods. So there's bundle care approach is also hand washing is encouraged as well as skin cleaning with usually when we are cannulate we often clean with alcohol, but in this case if we are going to put central venous catheter we often ask to clean the area with 4% chlorhexidine skin area to kill skin inhabitant microbes like MRSA, Staph aureus. Those. That's other way. Bundle elements, hand hygiene, maximum barrier precautions, chlorhexidine, skin antiseptic, optimal catheter site selection, subclavian veins as preferred site for non-tunnel catheter. We don't encourage do femoral lines, femoral veins. We always try to do there. VAP, ventilator associated pneumonia. That's another one. Patient is in semi-conscious or unconscious state. We are put in endotracheal tube. So same as that, patient may introduce there. There are mouth care is very much important. So sedation vacations. We are not trying to continuously sedate the patient. Proton pump inhibitor prophylaxis are given to reduce gastric acidity, and DVT prophylaxis are also advisable. Then mouth care, consider chlorhexidine education and training program. New generation ET tubes like impregnate material with antibiotics and nanoparticles, oral gastric tubes, ambulation. So antimicrobial coated with ET tubes, silver coating, silver sulfadiazine coating, chlorhexidine recommended by some too, because it's like it's a foreign body. So removal of this like urine catheter, it may help. Most important thing is avoid intubation if possible. That is the most important thing. And weaning, try to remove, and if it is not necessary, always try to remove the ETT. These are just we have discussed somewhere there. Escape. These are the highly pathogenic and multi-drug resistant pathogens. So strict compliance with infection control guidelines are very much important. Hand washing is the mainstay. How about transmission-based precautions? What are transmission-based precautions are used for patients who are known or suspect to be infected or colonized with highly transmissible or epidemiologically important pathogens for which additional safety precautions beyond standard precautions are required. There are three types of transmission-based precautions. We know organism can transmit by contact, like COVID. Droplet, yes, airborne, like TB. Now it term airborne. COVID also initial droplet. Likewise. So contact precautions, contact nowadays we often do direct contact, indirect contact, direct transfer of organisms from body surface to body surface. While indirect is transfer of microorganism to a contaminated intermediate subjects like doorknobs, likewise. So nowadays we are so reluctant. We are applying alcohol based things, then sodium hypochlorite based disinfectants. Likewise, we do, and we ask to in here contact precautions. We may use gloves, hand hygiene, gowns, and personal protective equipments are there, and also minimize the visitors. It is not related to COVID, but also it's related to all the things. Droplet precautions, we have to use masks, personal protective equipment, also hand hygiene, patient placement, quarantine, like patient transport. About the airborne precautions, again, patients specifically, like here you can see tuberculosis, measles, chickenpox, disseminated herpes zoster, like. right? So patient transport every aspect hand hygiene because airborne precautions. It's highly infectious. So thank you very much.